Hi there, I'm Lonnie here with special. Well, I'm not even going to call you special guest anymore because we're going to be doing this fairly regular. Mark,
Howdy.
And we're going to try something new here to kind of get everybody's attention, and we're going to talk about not only new story arcs in the comic book world because we haven't been doing enough comic book love lately.
This Sunday?
We're going to do some
I won't be here, so
old story arcs, new story arcs, a little bit of Marvel, a little bit of DC, whatever else we can find. You read Walking Dead?
I do not read The Walking Dead.
Okay.
I had the first 100 issues and just never got into it. I started to try to read it when the series came out and just, didn't really follow it.
What we're going to tackle to begin with is the early 90s crossover, X-Cutioner song. And this was like one of those, God, you remember when you could get the individual packs in the, like at the store?
Yeah.
Like you didn't even have to go to the comic book store. You could get these books. They were like where you could used to get them in the little poly bags.
At the magazine counter, at the magazine rack in the grocery store and stuff.
Yeah. And
right there next to Mad Magazine.
It always bothered me because they only had like the last one I could ever find was the X-Force Stryfe versus Apocalypse issue where they actually threw down.
Yeah.
And that was it. And I was stuck for like 10 years only knowing the story up to that. But I had read the whole first 8 parts like 20 times up till then.
Right.
And then finally I found the later issues, which that might not be something bad for me to brush up on, see if they have them here.
Oh, I'm pretty sure
I would
they
even
do.
go for the trade if they had it.
I'm pretty sure. I mean,
but
this
yeah,
place
speaking
is-
of, we're filming here at Infinity Flux, who is our title sponsor, and I am curious if they have a X-Cutioner song trade. I know it exists.
the trade paperback?
Yeah, the only place I've ever seen it was.
They actually, I know a place where you can get it, but I don't know about the trade paperback, but I know a place where you can lay hands on the trade paperback.
Well, I'm going to try to get it.
Because I just had my hand on it today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
because I thought about bringing it, and I was like, nah, I didn't have the $12 for it, so.
That's a little pricey.
Yeah.
Well,
it's the whole thing.
Might be a good idea to like maybe read it on Marvel Unlimited or something. That wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah.
But the story goes like this. Xavier is. Well, he was like giving some kind of speech at a peace conference or something.
So it was a Lila Cheney concert. So you always have to throw a wonderful mutant teleporter Lila Cheney in there, and it was a unity thing. Xavier trying to promote his whole mutants and humans live together thing. So he was giving this big speech, and in the middle of his speech, he gets shot.
Yeah.
And then hilarity ensues.
There were like a lot of people in the crowd, if I remember correctly, like yelling insults at him and stuff while he's speaking. And of course they did because nobody was happy about Xavier doing this because they were like, look, you're putting yourself out there. Somebody's, and they had, I think it was like Bishop and several other people here and there, like guarding and looking around for people, and suddenly out of nowhere, Cable pops up and boom, and of course, he blatantly says, hey, the name's Cable, don't forget it,
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, okay.
And, it was really, I think the really cool part about it is that Marvel was using that anti-mutant hysteria in the comic books to pinpoint, like, different varieties of racism.
Oh, yeah.
That were still going on in the 90s. I mean, hell, it's still going on today, but, so they were trying to do it where Xavier was giving the speech without letting anyone know he was a mutant. So they were scared about that. And yeah, you're right. There were people in the crowd hurling insults, mutie, flat scan. What were the other words they used? There was all kinds of different little, like...
I don't remember enough about the story to pinpoint specific insults.
Well, when you asked me to come on and read this, I read back through it real quick.
I kind of wish I would have done the same. But no, he ends up getting shot, and that was pretty well, like in that same issue, if I'm not mistaken, it was Iceman and Colossus were like shopping for groceries while it was going on.
Yes, Iceman and Peter are shopping for groceries. Scott and Jean are on a date.
Yep.
Scott's daydreaming about Psylocke. Jean's a telepath. She can read his mind.
Yeah, I remember that.
Because that was pretty much right after the whole, I think Claremont was still working on it at the time, but that was right after the whole relaunch of X-Men back in the 90s, and it was, I think,
Claremont was off of it. He lasted, I think, 3 or 4 issues on the regular.
That's right.
X-Men
He did
series.
3 issues, and then he was gone.
And this, I think, the first X-Men series for X-Cutioner song was number 14.
Yeah, which was after the Omega Red story arc.
Yeah.
Is that it? Yeah. Okay.
So you've got the Dark Riders, who were basically the Horsemen of Apocalypse at the time.
Right.
They pop up and kidnap Scott and Jean, and like basically beat the hell out of everybody else.
Pretty much.
And so they come to find out that Xavier has been infected. It wasn't just a bullet.
It was a techno-organic bullet.
Yeah, you think it would have been a lot easier just to shoot him with a bullet. Maybe it would have took him out. But instead, it's a slow-moving virus that, I guess, over the course of several days is just taking over his body and shutting down his system, that kind of thing.
Well, I think part of that was to
plot point.
Plot point to well, you got to remember that Cyclops is so. Cable's entire arm and most of the left side of his body is techno-organic because he was infected as a baby with the techno-organic virus and then sent to the future. So it was a way for them to point the finger even more strongly at Cable as he's got a techno-organic arm, it's a techno-organic bullet.
Had they, at the time, I don't think they had established that Cable's deformities were techno-organic virus. They actually were kind of pinpointing that even a few issues later. Remember during Fatal Attractions, which that would be a pretty sweet one to cover later.
We can do that.
They, Magneto tore him apart, and he was like, oh, you're half machine, but you still live, and all that. And Cable never disputed that. Like, everybody always thought he was like half cyborg, and they didn't really start doing the whole thing until I think the Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix.
That's right.
That miniseries, I think, basically established what had happened to Cable when he was young, and so. I don't know. That's like one of those things that they kind of retconned, I guess, where they were like, we're going to make it a virus from now on.
Yeah.
And but this, if I'm not mistaken, was the second mention, because the first mention of a techno-organic virus was when Baby Cable was infected. And I don't think anybody had put 2 and 2 together yet that Baby Nathan and Cable were the same person.
Right, and then also there's like 2 or 3 different versions of the techno-organic virus, because there's the techno-organic virus that Apocalypse used, which he got from celestial technology, which is what he infected Cable. Nathan with, and so forth. And then there's the techno-organic virus that Warlock's entire race is made out of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so there's like at least 2 that I know of, and there could be more, because
wasn't that the Phalanx?
The Phalanx were a mutant offshoot of the same race.
Yeah.
Because you had Warlock and Magnus, and Warlock was around for a while, and then Warlock died, and then there was nothing for a while, and then Douglock, and then you had the Phalanx Covenant, which brought back the techno-organic race and actually gave them a name.
I couldn't remember exactly how they came about because I missed the early issues of that. I read some of the Phalanx Covenant and wasn't really in tune with exactly how that whole thing. I knew Cameron Hodge had something to do with it.
You read the Gen X issues, didn't you? Because of Jubilee.
Pretty much, yeah. But anyway, back to X-Cutioner song. They end up. Sinister is the guy who. It's not Apocalypse.
But he's
Sinister.
Pretending to be Apocalypse because he's a shapeshifter.
And so they finally the Dark Riders go and wake up Apocalypse, and they're like, hey, somebody's it's being carried out in your name, everything's just gone to chaos, and Apocalypse is like, well, I've been woke up early, it's time to go see what's going on.
Yeah.
And you really see Stryfe is just a mental basket case.
Well, I mean, Stryfe's issues come from the fact that he's a clone of Cable.
He was raised by Apocalypse.
Raised by Apocalypse, and
at this point, we don't know all specifically.
That. I think that's another retcon. Yeah, I think that's another retcon they came up with years later. But he wanted to use take out everybody who was a threat to Apocalypse at the time, which would have been for some reason the entire Summers family is a threat to him, which they've still not established yet.
Well,
unless since as old as he is, unless they're somehow descendants of his. but they're not Clan Akaba.
I've never known of Apocalypse to have offspring of any kind.
They Chamber. So you're a Gen X fan. Chamber is a descendant of Apocalypse.
How?
So Apocalypse has been around since like ancient Egypt.
I know his origins, but I didn't know he had any offspring.
He's been around for years, and so this of course came out years later, back when they did like the story of the 12, and even further on. There's actually a group in the Marvel Universe called Clan Akaba, which they are all descendants of Apocalypse, and they worship him in the whole 9 yards. Chamber is a descendant. Jonathan Sarsmore is a descendant of Apocalypse.
I've never read that.
Yeah, it comes about much later. Like there's actually a point in time in the comic books where he goes around looking a lot like Apocalypse. Like he's got the little blue lines and the gray skin, the whole 9 yards.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of freaky. And then his whole power structure changed at that time too, because he went from being that telekinetic, telepathic to.
They had like the flames all over.
Like apparently they repaired him, and he came out looking like Apocalypse. I'll have to find it.
I'm gonna have to do some reading on that.
Yeah, but so basically the whole Summers family is a threat to Apocalypse, and so Stryfe, where we get to what is my favorite, because I'm a huge Havoc fan. You know, we've talked about this before, and my favorite scene with Havoc ever happens in this story arc where Stryfe has them trapped on the moon. He has Cable, Scott, and Jean trapped on the moon, and he's got them in a force field that is genetically coded to the Summers bloodline. And only, there's no way the X-Men are going to get in, because only people with the Summers bloodline can get through the thing. And he's giving his normal, villain monologue. And as he's giving his villain monologue from off panel, he gets plasma blasted off the screen. And as he's laying there starting to get up, he goes, "I forgot about Alex." And it pans over to to Alex, and he's there in his uniform, his X-Factor uniform's all ripped up, and he's like, "Yeah, they all do." And my all-time favorite Havoc moment ever, because it's just, he's the most underutilized X-Men of them all, I think. I've always been a huge fan of his. I've never been a Scott Summers fan. I'm a Alex Summers all the way.
Huh, interesting. Because like Cyclops, he was the guy that whenever I first got into comics around 93 or so, Cyclops was always front and center, X-Men team leader, and I like the whole blue and yellow and the visor, and I was like, you know what, he's my favorite guy. I didn't even know who he was.
Right.
But I was like, he is the guy that I like. And then, of course, the cartoon introduced me to Jubilee, which, surprisingly, she was quite absent from this story.
She was, actually. She was.
Where was she at?
Had
they taken her out of, like, field
No, she
missions?
was. Huh.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go back and look through that, because I don't remember, because she would have been there, because she was there through all of the first three. We were in issue 14. I know.
Yeah, she was there, like, the whole time.
When did they start Gen X? It was way after that.
Number 38, right about.
So it wasn't that. She wasn't running around with Sean and Emma at that point in time. That's a very good question.
Yep, we're gonna have to find that out.
Why was Jubilee not in X-Cutioner song?
Yes, that'll be.
Maybe she was the secret one really behind it.
Yeah, right. I wish. But now I will talk about, they did have an epilogue to the story, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. She was featured prominently in it.
I remember that.
But yeah, Stryfe takes them to the moon, but in the meantime, let's see, there's a lot that happens. The X-Men and X-Factor team up and go looking after Cable. They
Right.
look for him everywhere. Wolverine and Bishop go after Cable. They actually get on his trail and find him. But X-Men and X-Factor go after Cable, and in the process run into X-Force, and they are in no mood to be screwed with.
Right.
And they get in this big battle.
Our boss.
Yeah, they get in a huge battle, and while they're like looking around at a warehouse and stuff, I think it's Storm, Beast, and a handful of others end up getting into a fight with the Horsemen. Because I remember the big thing is nobody knew where the Horsemen were at. They were in a dark warehouse. They were looking around, and like suddenly out of nowhere, Famine leaps down out of the ceiling and lands on Beast, and he like shrivels up to almost nothing.
Yeah.
That was a scene that really stuck in my mind, because I was like, wow, because Beast was like a big dude, and then he shriveled up to half my size.
Yeah. And then the other one where she tried to use her powers on
Colossus.
And since Colossus doesn't need food or anything in his metal form,
it backfired
on her, and she started eating herself. And of course, War, who was in love with her, goes all psycho.
Yeah.
And
I forgot about that. That's pretty neat that we brought that up.
There was like 5 different story arcs running through this entire thing, and they all kind of converged at this one point.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to see how they worked all of those together, because you had the whole story part with Scott and Jean being kidnapped by the Dark Riders, the Apocalypse story arc, the Stryfe Cable story arc, them hunting down Cable, And wasn't this one of the things, because like for a while there they had Bishop come back, and he had come back because an X-Men was going to betray Professor Xavier, and wasn't this one of the ones they finally they said that this was it before they finally settled on that it was Onslaught?
No, I don't think this was any of the X-Trader. They may have alluded to that, but I don't think they wanted to.
Because like every time they did something like that, there was Bishop going, "This is it. This is what I was sent back to stop," and then we finally find out.
Well, he never really knew, because the records were broken and all that. But this was when the X-Trader storyline was at fever pitch. It went pretty solid from 91 through 96.
Yeah.
Roundabout. And that was like an eternity, because that was like my entire childhood right there.
Yeah. And then there's also, well, no, that's a completely different story arc. Never mind. We won't go into the missing Summers brother, which the way they ended that, I hated.
Yeah. But we've got a lot of stuff to talk about.
We are off tangent.
We are. This is typical comic book, though. We get talking about X-Cutioner song. Next thing you know, Third Summers brother, Onslaught. Because like a lot of plot points started in this series. And this was
the legacy virus started.
The legacy virus, and that was the thing is, they were gonna. Sinister had captured Scott and Jean, and was gonna hand them over to, and that never did really make sense to me, because he gave Scott and Jean to Stryfe in return for the genetic code of the Summers. Couldn't he have gotten
it from them?
From them, and that. Plot hole.
And especially Sinister being, well, I don't think they had established Sinister at that point as being who he is. Like at that point, he was just the face behind the Marauders.
This was like another 2 more years before they did the Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix.
And I don't think that they had established him as the, I'm the biochemist from back in England that Apocalypse mutated, and I can use this genetic strength. Yeah, I don't. Well, no, like. When they retconned it, yes, he had the know-how.
Yeah,
but at that point in time in the storyline, I don't think that they had established his doctorate, as so to speak.
They kind of made him out to be kind of an idiot.
Kind of, yeah. He was just kind of like this shape-shifting guy who apparently was vulnerable to Cyclops' optic blast.
Yep.
And that was it. That's all you really knew about him.
Like you knew he was kind of a bad guy.
Yeah.
But you didn't know really what he could do. And that was funny because, Apocalypse ends up going after Stryfe, gets the unholy hell beat out of him by Stryfe, goes to the X-Men, says, hey, we could team up. He cures Xavier, which I thought that was wrapped up in a nice, neat little package plot-wise.
Deus Ex Apocalypse.
Yeah, that was it. He just healed, like Apocalypse the Faith Healer. And so...
I'm sorry, I can only see the little, because like when they came out with the Apocalypse trailer, I can only see that Ivan Ooze looking guy going, and I heal you with the purple ooze. But yeah, they get that, and he ends up going after him again, and they like really, he's like beat all the crap, and so finally at the end, they end up rescuing Scott and Jean, and Apocalypse is beat all to crap, nearly dead. Right, because he has to crawl back to his tomb.
Yeah,
remember that.
Archangel's there, and he's like, "Hey, I've been wanting to kill you ever since you did this
to my wings." Yep.
And so he finally decides, "No, I'm not going to kill you. I'm just going to let you lay there and bleed to death." And that was probably a mistake, because he ends up recovering, and we find out Apocalypse, though, he didn't come back until
after Onslaught.
It was at the beginning of the Onslaught story, because
because
Uncanny X-Men 335, oh my God, I remember that, was the first issue of the Onslaught, the main story.
Right,
phase
it's the
one.
Watch, and it's
and
Apocalypse
he was wrapped up
looking at the Watcher, knowing that something was going to happen, and basically him and Osmodeus, which I liked that guy that they introduced. That was kind of cool. He was just this guy that just chronicled all of the stuff. But after the Onslaught thing was over, and after the whole Well, no, he came back in Age of Apocalypse, which was before that, wasn't it?
Well, that was the Age of Apocalypse.
And then, so we didn't see him, but we didn't see him from that. And then the first time we saw him in 616 continuity was, after, because I think after that was
it was
the
after
12,
Onslaught happened. He woke up and
it was the 12 storyline, I think.
Yeah, I mean they kind of hinted around that he was coming around and he was plotting and this and that, and the 12 was when it all kicked off.
Yeah.
But Apocalypse, I mean, they use him for big events, but he's a very awesome villain who is underutilized. I mean, I don't think they use him near enough. Well, maybe they do. Maybe they use him the right amount. That's why he's so cool, is because they only bring him out for the big events.
And then every now and then they kind of sort of make him. It's kind of like with Star Trek the way they did the Borg. You know, like you had the Borg, they were really big and really bad when they first introduced them, and then you throw him into Voyager and they become pansies. You know, you don't want to bring him around that much to where it's every time he shows up, it's Apocalypse again. We handled him last week. It's all good. You know?
Yeah, I mean, that eventually happened with Doomsday in the Superman comics.
Oh God, they keep bringing him back. What, every 2 or 3 months now?
I remember the last time I saw it was the Doom storyline.
Yeah.
You know, where he breathed in the Doomsday spores and became Doomsday.
Yeah.
I don't even know how that wrapped, but
Yeah.
we'll probably get to that at some point.
But I think you're right. I think they utilize Apocalypse like very smallly, kind of like in Fantastic Four. You really very rarely ever see Doctor Doom. You know, but when he shows up, oh dear God.
Yeah.
You know, same thing with Apocalypse. It's like, oh well, so cancel Sunday brunch. Apocalypse is here.
So this ends up Cable gets hold of Stryfe and he drags him into this time vortex as a bomb goes off and they both disappear.
Yep.
Apocalypse is dead on the moon, and at the very end, Sinister is out with his assistant in this cabin out in the woods, and he has this canister that has the genetic material of the Summers, and he pops it open and it hisses and nothing's in there. And come to find out, there was something in there.
The legacy virus.
Yes, and it actually hits his assistant because he starts coughing.
Threnody. Wasn't it Threnody?
No, it was a dude.
Oh yeah.
It was like a dude in a lab coat with blonde hair and glasses, but he was a mutant. And you know, he starts coughing, and he was like, "Oh yeah, dude, look after that cough." And he sends him on his way, and unknown, that's patient 0. I'm assuming Mr. Sinister is immune to all known pathogens.
Well, I'm trying to remember, and I'd have to look it up because
when the
legacy virus first came out, it only affected mutants, and then Moria McTaggart was the first baseline human that caught it.
Sinister's not a mutant, is he?
No, he is not. He is
that's
a
why
mutate.
it didn't affect Sinister.
He is a mutate. Apocalypse turned him into gave him his powers. A lot of Apocalypse's people are that way. They're either they were mutants that were empowered, or you get that stupid story arc where they turn the Hulk into war.
I remember that.
God, it's like, how many people can we make war? They turned Wolverine into war once.
No, they turned Wolverine into death.
Oh yeah, that's right. Wolverine was
He had
dead.
the ninja outfit.
Yeah,
and
that
everybody
ninja
was like,
outfit.
Wolverine's dead. Nope, he's dead.
Yep. That was after he got his adamantium ripped out.
He got it back.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, you're right.
And then he came back during the beginnings of the 12 storyline.
Yep. But yeah, you're right. So X-Cutioner song leaked off a bunch of things. I think that's really where we started getting techno-organic virus pretty strong. Legacy virus, of course, born there. And I do think you're right. The writers missed that point where they could have been like, "Oh, hey, I've got Scott and Jean here. Let me take a blood sample, and then I'll give them to Stryfe."
Whatever.
Instead of, because that would have been cool. We would have had, without having to go to Age of Apocalypse, we would have had Nate Gray running around, because we know he can clone people because he cloned Jean years ago.
Well, on top of everything else, after that whole story wrapped up, that was when, really, I mean, of course, my favorite issue of the entire saga happened, and that was Uncanny X-Men number 290, can't remember. But it was the issue, it was called Song's End, and it was where Xavier, as a result of being healed from the virus, temporarily regained his ability to walk. And Jubilee catches him out by himself. Now, why everybody's not crowded around Xavier at this point, I have no clue. But Xavier's out walking around, and Jubilee is like, "Hey, go rollerblading with me." And they end up going rollerblading together, and he's out there. Oh, God. That was a really good story because you actually got to see, number one, Jubilee was the focus.
Right.
And number two, you actually got to see that kind of sort of father-daughter dynamic between the two. And you actually got to see Xavier, who is normally a stick in the mud, kind of open up and be a little more youthful.
A little bit more human, yeah.
Yeah. And that was pretty cool. And then eventually he lost his ability to walk again. And
I think he lost that one during the Mirror Island saga again.
yeah, because he was walking up till that point, and then how many times?
Four that I can count.
Xavier's dead at the moment, right?
Right. Currently
Okay.
he's dead, and when they do the relaunch, when they do Resurrection, we're going to have Magneto leading the X-Men,
Yeah.
believing in the unity of mutant and humankind.
Well, he's actually. I don't think he's going to be leading the X-Men per se. He's going to be the instructor of the original 5.
He's going to be in both though, because they said something about him being in blue and gold.
Okay, that'd be
So
neat.
I mean,
can't
yeah,
wait.
I think he's going to be. I
That's
think
just-
mainly he's going to be in blue, which is the original 5, which.
That's in the coming weeks. Anyway, I mean, because X-Men Prime came out this past Wednesday, which you can get a copy at Infinity Flux.
Yep. Right
And,
here in Hickson, Tennessee.
Yes, and like I'm going to be picking up my copy here in about 20 minutes.
Oh, there you go.
But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's happened since, but I think pretty much every plot thread that they did in X-Cutioner Song was pretty well wrapped up over the next 7-8 years. Even the Legacy virus kind of crapped out around 98, 99, something like that.
Well, yeah, and personally, that right there is so. I'm a huge Joss Whedon fan, and that is one of the things that I am most pissed off about him for, because he brought Colossus back. As huge of a Colossus,
Is he the
fan
one
as
that
I
did
am,
that in Uncanny
He's the one that
X-Men?
he.
No.
He brought him back in Amazing X-Men.
Okay, because Colossus died in
Right.
Uncanny.
Because Colossus died curing the Legacy virus, because his sister had passed away from it, and Beast found the cure.
Yep.
But they determined that the cure, like all they had to do was they had to inject it to a mutant. That mutant had to use their powers, and it would release the cure airborne. But it would kill whoever did it.
Yeah.
So they locked it up until they could find a way to not do it. And then they're all out playing basketball, and Colossus.
Were they legit playing
They
basketball?
were legit playing basketball, and because there was this whole thing where they were talking about playing basketball without using powers, and Gambit was like, "No, mon cher, we're mutants. We use our powers," and they talk about embrace who you are, kind of a thing. And while they're out playing basketball, Pete walks into the lab and knocks out the Cecilia Reyes, I think that was who it was.
Yeah, she was there at the
The
time. I don't
doctor
remember
who could
that
project
happening,
force
but-
fields. He knocks her out. He sprays because like her force field prevents like physical stuff, but he sprays her with a knockout spray and knocks her out. And he takes the needle, stabs it in his chest, and then you see his power signature. And they even mention it's like it's Colossus's power signature times like 1 billion, and he's dead. But that cures the Legacy virus, and for
That was
me,
a noble sacrifice that should have meant something.
right, and for me, that was the ultimate of Colossus, because he said he did it so that no one would have to suffer the way his snowflake suffered, and that was Alana, and I was like that. I've still got that issue at the house, and then Joss comes along and brings him back, and I'm just like, you just crapped on everything that they wrote into his noble sacrifice. I could have gone without seeing Colossus again ever. As huge of a fan as I am of Colossus.
There was mighty, because that was right about the time I started getting really back into it, was when he died.
Mm-hmm.
And surprisingly, about the time he came back is when I got back out of comics.
Yeah, I think that was about when I got out of it too, because like somewhere around the 2000s, I really need to start picking stuff.
I think it was
up.
like 04 is about the time like that started.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Astonishing X-Men.
Yeah, you're right. Astonishing, not amazing. I'm sorry.
Oh. But yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff happened in X-Cutioner Song. I figure we pretty well covered it.
I think we have.
Yeah. But I think we're going to wrap on that one. And we're going to be talking about some other stuff. Haven't quite decided yet. But we're going to be doing other segments in the coming days. And so basically, if you don't see anything like a stream or anything, you'll be seeing us So, all right. Well, anyway,
Should we apologize to them for that?
No, they'll deal with it. But anyway, I'm Lonnie.
I'm Mark.
And we are Untitled Nerd Network. This has been a comic book discussion of the X-Cutioner song story. Well,
We're going to ask them to name it.
Yes. This is just comic book discussion right now. But if you can come up with a catchy name, there might be something in it for you. Who knows?
Oh,
But
well, there you go.
comment or whatever. Send us an email, unnentries@gmail.com, or private messages on Facebook or on YouTube, and let us know. Do you have a catchy name that you could call this segment?
What? Name that segment.
Yes, pretty much. But okay, we're gonna sign off for real this time.